Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. This is Firoze Manji from Daraja Press Podcasts. Today, we're going to be discussing what is the future for Mother Earth in the light of the new regime in the USA. I mean, there's a lot of material that's been appeared about the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement from USA, the largest polluter in the world, the removal of all constraints on industry, oil, offshore drilling. There's the whole issues of that were articulated in Project 2025, the dismantling of environmental justice, the gutting of Endangered Species Act, the prioritizing of drilling for oil and gas and other minerals, to say nothing of the genocidal policies that were part of the Biden regime and the military contribution to greenhouse gases emissions. So, what are the implications for the people and environment of the African continent? What threats are now posed? What are the potential oppositions and protests likely to come from? How do we organize against that? My guest today is the amazing Nnimmo Bassey. Um, Nnimmo is, I'm sure, known to many of you. He is the director of the think tank Health of Mother Earth Foundation, HOMEF, and a member of the steering committee of Oil Watch International. He was chair of the Friends of the Earth International until 2012 and executive director of Nigeria's Environmental Rights Action until 2013. He is the co-recipient of the 2010 Right Livelihood Award, also known as the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize. And in 2012, he received the Rafter Human Rights Award. And in 2014, he received Nigeria's national honor as a member of the Federal Republic in recognition for his environmental activism. He is a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Architecture and has authored numerous books on environment, architecture, and poetry, amongst which more recently we have the wonderful collection of poems, I See the Invisible. And it's that which I'd really like to build on because I think Africa is invisible. There's a lot of discussions about North America, about Latin America, about Middle East, about Asia, but Africa seems to be outside that discourse, even though the effects and policies that are likely to be implemented or are being implemented will have very serious effects on the continent. So it gives me great pleasure to have you on our show today, Nnimmo. Thank you for sparing time. I know how incredibly busy you must be, so I appreciate your taking time.
Thank you so much, Firoz. Nobody could be as busy as you are. So I think we're in the same boat at this time.
So I'd really like to sort of get your idea, your impressions of, well, what are the consequences of this new regime? What does it mean for us on the continent? What are the threats that we are going to be facing, and what are the possibilities for organizing against that? And I think health. Many of us look at at HOMEF as being one of the critical leaders in our thinking around this.
Well, thank you. As you said earlier, Africa is very clearly invisible in terms of global discussions about the tornado and volcanoes that are being released across the world from one particular spot. And of course, that is not right because Africa is extremely significant to the trends in the world. And Africa does really have solutions to many of the challenges that others are actually blind to. So yes, we can say right away that no matter what regime, and I like that term regime, is in power in the United States, the implication for Africa largely runs the same. Because as we all know, Africa has generally been seen as a storehouse for extracting certain resources where they are needed, destruction of the environment, mindless exploitation of resources, both human and material, and then, of course, leaving the mess behind without clearing anything up. So that has been our history. And right now, this may be compounded by the fact that the occupant of the White House has never made any attempt to hide his attitude towards Africa. One could say that he holds Africa in contempt. That can be argued, but that appears to be what it is. And then with the overall tendency to go it alone and to rule like a captain of the empire, to have the world at his feet, means that Africa would be holding the wrong end of the stick unless the continent is united in standing against the assault that is unfolding. What is going on is not, it may be shocking, but it's not surprising because we've never really been in the equation when it comes to doing things in a bilateral way that is respectable. And because the occupant of the White House is not really interested in multilateralism, that makes it more complicated for the continent. For example, we could talk about the pulling out of the US, the indication of the US that they're going to leave the Paris Agreement. Now, I'm not a very big fan of the Paris Agreement, but it does stand out as one critical agreement when it comes to tackling global change, global warming from a global perspective. Indeed, it's the only agreement we have. It's a very defective agreement because I do remember that at COP15 in 2009, where we were all campaigning against the target of 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial levels. That was 1 degree. Now the Paris Agreement celebrates 1.5 degrees as the best target. And it always shocks me when people, keep parroting 1.5 or well below 2 as something that's acceptable. For Africa, that is clearly not acceptable because for every change in temperature, Africa experiences about 50% more than the global average. So if the global average for the world is 1.5, we're already sentencing Africa to burning. This is a situation where Africa is going to be cooked. And already within 2024, the world had recorded on at least one day a temperature increase that was up to 1.5 degrees, if not above 1.5 degrees Celsius, beyond pre-industrial level. So, and we're not on track to keeping to that limit. So when the biggest polluter in the world pulls out of that agreement, as defective as it is, that indicates that they're going to do things without regard to what happens anywhere else, without regard to the impacts on Africa. And we can be sure we're going to have freak cyclones on the southeastern border of Africa. We're going to have more droughts, more famine, more locust runs. We're going to have coastal erosions and loss of the map of Africa will likely change. Because as coastal erosion rises, Africa is surrounded by water body. As we have more floods and more coastal erosion, we are certainly having territories washed out into the sea. So everywhere you look portends something really very harsh coming to the continent. And the sad thing is that no matter how powerful, how rich a nation is, no one can afford to be isolated because we're having complex polycrises confronting the world. No one nation is exempted from the impacts, as we've seen from the fires in California. We've seen when they have hurricanes over there, things can get really bad, even though the slogan may be, we first, we're standing alone, we're going to make it. That is the mindset of emperors and empires, but they never last.
You really think they never last? Some would argue. I interviewed Kali Akuno a couple of weeks ago, and he argues that what is happening in the US and on international level is a major restructuring of the world economy, a complete overhaul, so that it will be short-term pain for long-term gain for the owners of capital. What's your view of that?
Long-term gain, if I got you right, I would say that we are in for long-term losses. But for those who are controlling capital, those who are controlling technology, of course, going to be short-term gain, and they could gain a whole lot. Because we're seeing a kind of oligarchy that be playing out before us. We're just a boys' club of billionaires running the show, and the earth is now a source of resources extracted, exploited, resources, finances accumulated. So extraction of both resources and extracting finance, because we are hearing stories of exploiting nations and having those nations exploited, paying for the exploitation. We heard this in the first term. Now we're hearing it again. So when we have people with this mindset running the show, we can also understand why there's so much investment in the race for space. Now, Africa is not in that race. We're not racing for Mars or for the moon or anywhere. But if our resources are being extracted in a mindless way to fund technologies that would take humans to space, it means that one thing is those who are projecting into that dimension don't really care what happens on the long term on planet Earth, because they believe there's a place to escape to. And that place to escape to, nobody is certain about what the future of living in Mars or living on Mars or living on the moon or even an asteroid would mean for humanity. And how many people go there? Maybe just a boys' club. A few of them could get there, like we saw in the movie Looking Up, or was it Don't Look Up? Or Look Up? I missed the title, but that movie really showed what could happen.
Don't Look Up. Yeah.
Look Up, yes. And they refuse to look up. And they're still refusing to look up except through rockets. So I think we are in for very bad. For us in Africa, the future, if this kind of approach takes root beyond one term, even in one term is already very dangerous. If it takes to beyond one term, then that will be really harsh, and we have to take dramatic actions to ensure that we protect the interests of our common humanity.
I mean, one of the problems with the sort of discussions about the implications of the kind of environmental policies that the Trump regime will be implementing is that people talk about the continent or our countries, but let's look at Nigeria, where you are, and let's look at the specifics. I mean, we have a ruling class in Nigeria. You have a government which colludes with the American government, does it not?
You are absolutely right. We have politicians who are completely yielded to whatever comes from outside the continent, whatever comes outside the country, because it's a way of protecting themselves and a way of thinking they could have a safe haven where they could damage everything at home and then escape to. So that is a very sad reality, but is the truth. And
but is it not just that they are responding to things outside? Are they not become part of an international ruling class that has a vested interest in this? That its source of accumulation is that they don't have a difference in politics with those in the US.
Firoze, in a certain sense, yes, they are completely aligned because, I mean, we see in the US clearly that the leaders just care only about their own pockets. They don't even care about rules. They don't care about ethics. They're just thinking of themselves. It's something we have here. But the difference is that when it comes to pulling the shots, calling the shots at an elevated level, the Nigerian politician doesn't have the clout to do that. When it comes to dealing with the United States, for example, and this is why we're seeing the mass deportations that have started, which affects Nigeria, and the Nigerian government as far as to my own knowledge, have not made any critical comment on that. We've seen even other countries having difficulties standing up against that. But again, nobody really wants people to evacuate from their own countries to somewhere else. But the fact that humans have always been on the move cannot be denied. And no one can stop that movement, no matter how many walls we build, no matter the military we amass at the boundaries. No one can stop the fact that we have to cross-pollinate, and by moving, we help each other grow. So movement is positive, but not forced movement and not forced deportation.
Right. Let's focus down on where you are in the Niger Delta. I mean, that history over the last, 40 years, 50 years, is one of a major environmental destruction, a major destruction of a society and of its people and its cultures for the interests of the oil drillers and a collusion both at local and federal level in those policies that have destroyed so much of the Niger Delta. Perhaps you can help some of our viewers understand what has actually happened in the Niger Delta.
When it comes to this situation of ecological destruction of the Niger Delta on the altar of crude oil and gas, it's very difficult to explain in words. It's best seen and experienced to understand. It is utter destruction, complete degradation. It's the best definition of ecocide, where you have massive, extensive environmental degradation that may never be recovered, that could not be recovered in one lifetime, that you could just look at it. There are places I look at in the Niger Delta, and I know that no matter how long I live on planet Earth, I can never see them return to normal. Because you go to a community and the entire river is coated with crude oil. We have massive gas furnaces burning like Dante's hell, burning day and night continuously for decades without any respite. I mean, we can understand flaring of gas occasionally to relieve pressure from oil wells, but this is routine gas flaring going on at more than 100 fire furnaces across the region. So we've got, the best way to really explain this is, if you want to understand how degraded the environment is, you can just read the United Nations Environment Program research of Ogoniland, which was published in August 2011. That report showed that all the water bodies in that territory, Ogoni is a small territory, that's the home of Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was executed in 1995 on the sake of oil. Now, when we look at that, that report shows that all the water bodies in Ogoniland are contaminated. It showed that the soil in many places were contaminated to a depth of 5 meters. That's, you dig up to 5 meters, carbon pollution all the way down. And then, of course, if you go to communities, the fumes from hydrocarbon are so thick in the atmosphere that you would be wondering whether people survive in those territories. But of course, people don't survive for long in those territories. Life expectancy is an abysmal 41 years. Then in 2023, the government of one of the states in the region set up a commission called the Bayelsa State Oil and Environment Commission, and they undertook a study of pollution. This, to me, is the most polluted place in the region, and they published a report called Environmental Genocide. Anybody could Google and find that. Environmental Genocide was published in May 2023. Now, that report showed that it's a per capita contamination of 1.5 barrels of crude oil in the region. And that, of course, we have hard metal, heavy metals in the waters. You have hydrocarbon pollution in the waters up to 1 million times above safe limits. And we're talking about pollution ongoing at every moment. As we speak right now, there's a well that blew up in May 2020 and has been burning and spilling off the coast of one of the coastal regions in shallow waters, not deep waters. It's been burning for almost 5 years now, day and night, non-stop. Now, in all the pollution we talk about in Niger Delta, the oil majors from the US and from Europe, they're all involved. They've been exploiting, extracting, damaging the environment, and they get away with it because they do this in joint venture with the government. This is why we talk about the alignment of the forces, local and external. And now, of recent, these oil companies have tried to do what they call divestment. In other words, they're selling off their shares for the onshore activities in the Niger Delta to local companies, to Nigerian companies, to indigenous companies. And they're either moving away completely or moving to deeper waters where they will have less oversight. But this is a very tricky situation because one of the companies, a company like Shell, is selling to a company that is lending money to buy from them. And just think about the logic of that. I want you to buy something from me, then I give you the money to buy from me. It doesn't just it's not logical, it doesn't make sense. And then the staff will still be working. So it's like a shift in the corporate shield, so that what you see is not really what is going on. And they want to avoid historical responsibility for pollution that has been piled on since 1956, when the first commercially viable well was drilled. And I should just say that the oil well number one, recently I was at oil well number 1, number 2, number 3, number 6, number 9, and number 12, just to see for myself the situation. These were wells drilled in 1950s. They were abandoned mostly in 1970s, but those wells are still polluting the environment. Abandoned, not commissioned, not decommissioned, not properly secured, they're still polluting the environment. And recently, one of the activist groups in the region undertook blood sampling and testing of women who live close to these abandoned oil wells. And they found hydrocarbon in the blood sample of more than 80 women who were tested. I mean, our people are like moving corpses. And the world is silent to this. The US, with its corporation doing this, nobody's asking questions that saying, drill, baby, drill. And of late, the government is making moves to reopen the oil wells of Ogoni, which were shut down in 1993. And in 1993, when they shut down Ogoni, they militarized the whole region. Militarized the region, and now they're sending the military again. They're applauding the military for increasing oil extraction in the region. The military advisor to the president is now coordinating the move to get the Ogonis agree for the oil wells to reopen. So it's like the Nigerian state believes that crude oil, barrels of crude oil flow from barrels of the gun. And this is very disturbing.
Wow. I mean, I think what you've raised is a really important point about the report that came out, environmental genocide, and I think that there's often a tendency for people to think of environment as something different from humans, but we are part of that environment. We are a product of that environment. You can't talk about genocide of the environment without actually thinking about a genocide of the people.
Absolutely. It's, the genocide of the environment and environmental misbehavior by oil companies, for example, and mining companies around the world, and refineries across the world. The genocide caused by environmental misbehavior is just as dastardly, as bad as environmental that come from the barrels of the gun. Just that the gun shoots and kills you at once, but the barrel of crude oil may give you 5 years, 10 years to live. Now we're having children born with several kind of birth defects. This cancer is so prevalent. People used to have, cancer was like a story in the past, but now it's something that people are living with because of the level of environmental degradation. So it's really genocide. And I really applaud the writers of that report and the government of the state that commissioned the report, Bayelsa State, for receiving the report and pledging that they will do something about it. Now, environmental genocide was just the right terminology, the right term to declare the devastation that we have in the region.
So this is all being done by the Nigerian government in collusion with these corporations. It's not something that they're being told to do. It's not that they are getting messages from the White House saying, please would you pollute the environment. They are doing this directly themselves. And isn't this the problem we face across the continent, in each of our countries, that we are living under conditions where we have an elite that is exploitative. It isn't merely a victim of Washington.
Again, that is true. We have elites who have completely forgotten that they ought to be leading the people and for the best interests of our countries and continent. But we have elites who are completely, I don't have a respectful word to use, but they're completely gone bonkers when it comes to thinking about the common good. They don't care. And this is why it's time for Africans to support young people when there's an uprising, calling for justice, calling for true government that really cares about the people. This is the time to have transformative leadership on the continent. We can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome. Now, the pollution and the crisis, the violence we have in the Congo DRC, which is, since the time of Lumumba was killed for access to resources, both by external and internal forces, that is still the same story devastating that country today. The crisis we're having across the continent in South Sudan, for example. South Sudan is almost as contaminated with crude oil pollution as the Niger Delta. And we hear very little about it, but the area is completely, it should be a very rich, powerful nation, but it's completely impoverished by reckless exploitation, which is being, or again, condoned by the local elites. The problems we're having across the Sahel has led to the rise of the Alliance for Sahelian States, which is threatening to wreck the ECOWAS bloc. And so when we look at the way our countries have completely, we have leaders who don't care, and of course they're not getting directives from the White House, contaminate your country. No, they're not getting that. But they're being encouraged by corporations. Our governments, our politicians are like shoe shine boys for these corporate leaders, because whatever the corporations say, that's what they do. And they allow them to get away with murder because they're not being held to account for environmental crimes that are being committed across the continent.
I want to come back to this issue of what's happening in West Africa and the alliance that is being formed as we speak. But I just want to go back to the local, what was been happening in the Niger Delta, and it's you talk about the resurgence of oil exploitation, gas exploitation in Ogoni, and that has been a long battle, and an opposition and a movement that has arisen out of that, and the slaughter of Ken Saro-Wiwa and his comrades by the Nigerian regime. That wasn't a US pushed agenda. This is something that has been going on a major scale. So I mean, the question I want to pose in that context, how much worse could it get? I mean, the same question arises, when we are talking about the genocide in Palestine. A lot of people saying, oh, well, if we had the Democrats, things would be better. But it was the Democrats who carried out that genocide. And so, people say, well, it'll be worse under Trump. Well, how much worse can a genocide be? And so, I pose the same question to you. How much worse can the situation be for the people of Ogoni, for the people of Niger Delta, in the Trump regime?
Well, for the people of Gaza, what is going on is completely unthinkable, but unfortunately is the reality. The resilience of the people of Gaza tells us a lot. It gives us a lot of reasons to believe that the resilience of humankind, of humans, is very, very something that cannot be ignored or wished away. But again, we don't want to show that we are powerful, we can resist when we are being trashed and the environment is destroyed and everything is being leveled. Genocide, can we have a worse form of genocide? I just hope that we don't have. But what we're having is deepening every time. Ogoni land is a shadow of itself. I mean, Ken Saro-Wiwa was executed by the Nigerian state 30 years ago. This year is 30th anniversary of the execution. And in fact, for those who are watching, who watch history when it happened, when he and 8 other compatriots were sentenced to death, they were given 1 month within which to appeal. But within 10 days, they were executed. In other words, the appeal period had not even elapsed. So it was clearly state murder of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the rest. And this is the 30th anniversary, a time we should pause to look back. This is when they want to reopen the oil wells. It's like a celebration on the grave of the dead, on the graves of Ken Saro-Wiwa. Completely unthinkable. Then when it comes to can genocide get worse? Now, at the same time, this morning yesterday, there was a report about a new oil spill in Ogoni land. There's been a cleanup exercise going on, I must say, but this has not gone as far as we would say, well, Ogoni is being cleaned up. Now, there was an oil spill going on yesterday within one of Shell's facilities, and they have admitted that it was equipment failure. That is what they call a saver pit, where they could put some of the effluents in, got overflowing over. Got the whole thing overflowed into the environment. Now we're having that situation where pollution is still happening, oil spills are still happening, and somebody would think of reopening the oil wells. It's simply incredible. And so can genocide get worse? Apparently it could get worse in the Niger Delta. Because let me say something, because I live in the Niger Delta and I travel a lot within the Niger Delta. There's still some traces of places that are beautiful, which we fight to maintain that they don't destroy everything. But the level of militarization that started in the 1990s is unimaginable. You go in a boat in the canals, and wherever there's a oil pipeline crossing the water, there's also a military checkpoint. And everybody in the boat, if you're 100 in that boat or ferry or whatever, you are 2, you are 3, everyone on sighting the checkpoint must raise your hands. This is very humiliating. And you can't put your hands down until the military tells you to put down your hands. And all this is to make the people, to pacify and intimidate the people, to allow exploitation without any complaints. Can genocide get worse? Apparently it could get worse in the Niger Delta. Now it's 41 years, or life expectancy could possibly get to 30 years or less.
So one of the things that came out of the struggles in Ogoni land was the organizing, the formation of MOSOP, the mobilization of communities, and who are faced with this what was then and is still now environmental genocide. So help me understand what are the possibilities? What is organizing? What is happening, for example, in the Niger Delta? What where are the cracks that can light the light in? Where are the possibilities for organizing and not merely agonizing?
That's a very nice way to put it. And that reminds me of the fact that we are actually campaigning now for organizing, not agonizing. We want the Ogoni situation replicated around the world, just in the same line with the Yasuni, to Yasunize the world. The Yasuni people voted to keep the oil in the ground in Ecuador. The Ogoni people decided in 1993 to keep the oil in the soil. So organizing and Yasunizing are terminologies that have to find their place in the Oxford English Dictionary as clear words that talk about organizing. Now, what Mossop did was phenomenal, because Mossop did not only complain, they produced an Ogoni Bill of Rights. That was in 1990, where they presented the government, and government has not responded to that Bill of Rights. And that Bill of Rights clearly states what they want. They want to stop economic marginalization, political marginalization. They want to stop ecological destruction in their area. They want prior, free, informed consent about anything going on. They want to show that they are not a colonized people, they are not a conquered people. And that has been the driving force behind Ogoni. And maybe that's why Ken Saro-Wiwa was so hated by the system. A system he even operated in, and Mossop rose up by building up the sense of dignity within the Ogoni kingdoms. And they got the people to respect their culture, to learn from their culture, to stand up for their rights. And that is still what is sustaining that struggle till today. But unfortunately, Mossop has become fragmented. And that really stabs us in the heart. You have a number of people claiming to be presidents of Mossop. And so that when you've got a movement, a clear, non-violent, excellently organized movement, fragmented in that sense, then it makes it very easy to practice what we saw in colonial discourse as divide and rule. But organizing in the Niger Delta is still very strong, because despite all the pollution or the disregard for environmental justice, environmental rights, people are still taking litigation, for example, litigating outside of the shores of Nigeria, because within Nigeria, the cases could go on forever. The plaintiffs would die off and the cases are still in court. So tackling this cooperation in their home bases has become much more useful and brings quicker results. But beyond this, there's also constant organizing, non-violently, to resist any attempt to expand the genocide, to sacrifice more zones in the region. And this gives us a lot of courage and a lot of hope that we cannot fold our arms and say, well, the train has left the station. There's still a chance of bringing about a rebirth, restoring the area, rebuilding what has been lost, and hopefully within 1 or 2 lifetimes, getting environment restored to what it ought to be. It's something we cannot achieve apparently in 1 lifetime, because in the UNEP report, we learned when the United Nations Environment Programme issued a report on Ogoni land that beyond the cleanup, it may take up to 25 years to restore the environment. Now, remediation is one, restoration is another one. And we add to that reparation, because the people must be paid for what has been lost. Those who are alive must be compensated for what has been lost. Because you live in a territory, the soil is polluted, the water is polluted, the fish you have, if you manage to catch any fish, is contaminated. You grow crops in polluted soil, you are harvesting polluted products, and you are eating pollution. So people are born in pollution, they live in pollution, they play in pollution, they die in pollution, they are buried in pollution. It's completely unthinkable that our elites can allow this to happen, and they still think of expanding the zones of destruction. It's completely crazy. But again, I should also add, Firoze, if you permit me, that there is the hand that's coming from the outside, because the insatiable appetite of the global West for crude oil has allowed this to happen. Because the companies are exploiting to feed the appetite, the addiction to fossil fuels in Europe and in North America. This has added fire to the fuel in the Niger Delta and across our region. Now they push to extract oil from Okavango Basin, which is a UNESCO heritage site in Botswana and Namibia. They're extracting oil now in Salom Delta, another heritage site in Senegal. The Virunga forest in the Congo is also being targeted. None of this is for Africans. They're not extracting, just like the infrastructure map of our continent always starts from where resources are to the seaport for export. So the force that's coming from the outside is the insatiable appetite, the addiction for the resources on the continent.
So, to what extent what has happened in Ogoniland, what has happened in the Niger Delta, are these future mirrors for what is opening up in Okavango, what's opening up in Senegal, and so on? Are we going to see the same stories over again of a growing environmental genocide?
Absolutely, and unfortunately, if they allow it to happen, that's what they're going to see. We tell our communities and activists in Senegal, in Uganda, in Namibia, in Congo, DRC, we're telling them that, look, Niger Delta is a poster child of what should not be done, and you don't want it to happen in your country. Well, in Ghana, it was the same thing. When oil was found in Ghana, we told our kind of Ghanaian friends that, look, you're going to have economic dislocation, you're going to destroy your fisheries, which was a major income earner, and you're going to suffer what you are suffering. They all laughed us, they just said, we can't be as bad as Nigeria. But what is playing out is not different from what we have. Their fisheries is going to the dogs. And of course, gold mining is now getting more desperate and more destructive. Communities are having their rivers and streams polluted with cyanide, with acid, and it's really horrible. We're going to see the same thing in Senegal. We're going to see the same thing in Botswana. We're already seeing the thing happening in Uganda, where oil is being extracted, being drilled in a nature reserve. We're seeing that even the communities are being moved into camps that are nothing representing their natural way of living, and they're complaining. So, and of course, there's repression in that country. It's like history.
Well, that's not new, is it? I mean, Gulu has been like that for years. Turning the communities into camps is an old strategy. I just wonder whether, this goes on and the Nigerian government just simply closes its eyes to it and benefits from it. But what is the reaction of the Nigerian government to what's happening to your neighbors in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Chad, in Niger, and beginning to happen in Senegal? The formation of this counter
alliance.
To ECOWAS, yes, this alliance.
Yeah.
What is the significance of that, and what are the possibilities for an influence that HOMEF could have in terms of environmental policies in those regions?
Firoze, you're asking me a difficult question. But let me just say that what is happening in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, and the change of government, and even Guinea, and the change of government in Senegal, it's a big lesson for all the other countries in the region, because they look to see the citizens of those countries are celebrating the change that they're experiencing. I mean, France colonialism in Africa has been one of the worst, long-lasting infractions that no nation should tolerate. And so when any military man says, okay, I'm sending these people packing from my territory, the citizens were, yes, it's time to have that happen. And now the signals were, unfortunately, when it happened in the Niger Republic, Nigeria just had elections and we had a new president, and he had become the chairperson of ECOWAS, and he had to prove tough. Of course, those who are elected would not want to see those who are not elected in power in any country on their borders. And, so they took an action which was, of course, there was a heavy pushback by Niger Republic. And I'm not too sure the relationship between the two countries could be as cordial as it was. Because Niger is so much symbiotically connected to Nigeria. We have people living across those borders are artificial borders created by colonialism. Even though they even imposed language barriers, French and English, between us. But we had Nigerian government building railway lines into Niger, building infrastructure. Nigerians are living on both sides of the border. So it's very, very important that these two nations and other nations live in harmony, because the division between the nations of West Africa, indeed across Africa, they're all very artificial. I've gone to Guinea from Mali before, by just stepping over a bridge in a village. And there was not one official who say, "Hey, who's going there? Where are you coming from? Where are you going?" And the people are living without knowing that they're different countries. So cooperation, solidarity is much better if we can actually come together to unite on a Pan-Africanist basis and regain our dignity continentally and fight together to build a strong Africa. So what is happening right now must be disturbing, but it could also be an incubation of change that we could all watch to see. We don't want people taking power by force, but if that has happened, it's a fact of history. If those nations show that things can be done differently, then those who are elected ought better wake up and do things differently.
Okay, so then to conclude, let's just give us an idea about, what is Home F's plan for the next period, for the next 5 years, 10 years? What is your strategy? What what are the calls on solidarity that you would extend as well?
Yes, you asked me that question before and I did not answer it, so let me answer it now. Home F, of course, Nigeria is our base, but we are very much African, and we're looking at our continent very closely. We have allies across the continent. We have offices in a couple of places outside of Africa, outside of Nigeria. We work with communities across the continent. And everywhere we go, we're stressed in building solidarity. We are all that we hold the keys to wellness, because the continent is traumatized by decades, by centuries of exploitation. Our people are traumatized by environmental degradation, by economic mismanagement. And we believe that this is time to sit down and interrogate what is the true meaning of Ubuntu. How can Ubuntu help us as Africans to reclaim our dignity, to reclaim our lives, our territories, our systems of beliefs, and systems of economic relationships? How can we rebuild a situation where might is not always right, where we care about our neighbors and care about the welfare of everyone? How can we learn? What can we learn from Ubuntu that will build our wellness and well-being? What can we learn from Etuwem? We call it Etuwem in my language is Ibibio. The word for Ubuntu is Etuwem, the good life, living well. What does it mean to live well? Does it mean that, you have power, you can give instructions to countries, you can grab and own Gaza, drive the Gazans away and turn it to a real estate piece of real estate, just because you are an estate investor, forgetting that you are leading a nation and not leading a firm, a company. So this is what we're working on our mindsets. Although we're tackling environmental issues from the roots, which means tackle first the imaginaries. This is why we began a new program called Culture and Environment. And towards the end of this year, we're going to have a Culture and Environment Conference. I hope you come to visit Nigeria and be a part of that conference. We're having book days, we're having poetry days, we're having movie days. We see what we can learn from culture. Our culture is so rich. Even the ways of bringing about change, correcting mistakes, correcting aberrant behavior, they're all found in our songs, in our drama, in our conversations. Elders have wisdom, young people have wisdom. There's this sharing, that generational sharing is so critical. We are taking this up and looking for partners to help us understand the best way to go forward. And I believe that this pertains to every country in Africa, and we can work together to rebuild what has been destroyed.
I think that's really really encouraging, Nnimmo. It reminds me of Cabral and his ideas that culture is the core of building an alternative world, of organizing. That it can't be equated with the sort of touristy kind of exhibitions that we are often treated to, but rather as a very, very fundamental part of a struggle for human liberation. So I'm thrilled that that's the direction that you are planning. So please keep us all in touch with that. And if there's anything that we can do to help that process, you have only to ask.
Very good offer. We'll take you up on that.
Okay. Nnimmo, last message to the people watching and listening to the show. What should we all be thinking about now?
Well, what I would like to say is that things look very bad right now, especially with the change in the White House. But we also have to look at what we can do to ensure that things remain right in the Black House. And one thing we could do from the withdrawal from supporting multilateral system is the fact that that could also help us maintain our food sovereignty. The United States have been a big polluter of our foods by promoting genetically engineered organisms. And this, if they have less presence in our food systems, we have a chance of building our food sovereignty, recovering lost biodiversity, and placing power back in the hands of our local farmers. They are the ones who feed us. They're the ones who keep us healthy. They give us food that is like medicine, not food that kills us. And we always say, what we eat should not eat us. And so this is a silver lining I see in the crisis in the world today. It's a time to look inwards and let's not give up. Stand strong. Together we can fight, and together we can go far.
And maybe we can force the oil back into the soil and the coal into the hole.
Yes, we have to leave the oil in the soil and the coal in the hole. No better wisdom.
Okay, well, Nnimmo, once again, thank you so much for this really insightful and informative discussion. We've had lots of people make similar comments here, and I really appreciate you giving us your time. I think there'll be a lot of interest in many of the issues that you've posed, and a reminder that this is the 30th anniversary of the assassination of Ken Saro-Wiwa and his comrades, and sadly, it's the 30th anniversary of the resurgence of oil exploitation in Ogoniland once again. So, yeah, as they say, la luta continua. Let's not hope that it's translated as the looting continues.
Victoria Aseta.
Okay, Nnimmo, we're going to end the broadcast here, but please stay online while we upload the recording. Okay, and thanks for joining us, Nnimmo.
Thank you, Firoze, and thanks to everyone who joined us.